Hi, welcome to our daily encounter. Today we have the story about this blind beggar who's sitting beside the road on the way to Jericho, and he's sitting there and he hears the crowd. He hears a lot of commotion, and he inquires, hey, what's going on? And they told him that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, and then he begins to cry out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And the people were telling him, be quiet, stop crying out like that. And he just cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And then Jesus stops and commands that he be brought to him. And he came near and questioned him. He said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And he said to him, "Lord, I want to regain my sight." He says, "Receive your sight, your faith has made you well." And immediately he regained his sight, and then he ended up actually following Jesus, glorifying God, it says. And when all the people saw it, they gave praise to God. So here's a story about this guy who was at the end of himself. He was blind. He had no means to support himself, no means to work. And he's just there on the side of the road begging, asking for just any donation that anybody could give, and just in a really desperate situation. He doesn't seem to have anybody, any friends or relatives that are helping him. He's basically seems to be on his own. And this is a type of person that most people might try to pass on the other side of the road from, or might try to avoid. But this is the exact type of person that Jesus would go out of his way to speak to and to change the life of. And he does it here. Jesus doesn't pass by this blind man. When he hears those cries, "Son of David, have mercy on me," he came. He came and he asked him, What do you want me to do to you?" And this guy could have said a lot of things. We think, well, it's obvious he's blind, he wants to see, but there could have been other things he might have asked for. He might have asked, well, I could use a change of clothing, or maybe I could use, some wealth, or a house, or something like that. There could have been a lot of things that he asked for, but he knew what his root problem was. The root problem in his life was that he was blind. It was his blindness that was keeping him from living a prosperous life, and just getting by, really. And so he asked for the right thing. He asked to regain his sight, and Jesus does that very thing. He gives the man his sight, and from that point forward, he begins to follow Jesus, glorifying God. Now, what we have in this story is, yes, a historical story that actually occurred, but we also have a beautiful picture of what it means when a person does come to Christ, and when Christ, or rather should I say, Christ comes to them and touches their life. Because whenever we want to enter into all the blessings that God has for us, aren't we really a beggar? When it's all said and done, when you reduce it all down to the crux of it all, we come to the Lord as beggars, because we have to recognize the fact that we can't do everything on our own, and we have to recognize the fact that we are blind beggars before Him. Before Christ comes into our lives, we are blind. We might think that we understand what life is all about. We might think that we have all the mysteries of the universe solved. But really, at the end of the day, we have to recognize the fact that we are blind. We are blind to the true realities that lie beyond this world. The realities that are not put into a test tube, but are things that go on beyond what our eyes can see and what our ears can hear. And so we have to recognize the fact that we are blind to some truths that we need to be able to see. And when we recognize the fact that we are such people who are beggars because we are unable to achieve position before God based upon our own works, we recognize the fact that, and we are blind because we recognize that we don't completely understand everything on our own. And we come to Him in that condition, we cry out to the Lord, "Son of David, have mercy on me," we can be guaranteed that that's going to catch the attention of the Savior. And where we might be neglected by everybody else, where other people might pass us by, He'll turn to us and come to us and touch our lives and change our lives forever. And what we have to recognize too is that when He does come to us, that we recognize that, or we recognize what the core problem is in our lives. And that we're not asking for a bunch of superficial stuff from Him, but get to the very heart of the matter. Lord, I am blind. Help me to see. Help me to see the truth. Help me see the reality about yourself. Help me see the spiritual realities that go beyond this world. Help me to understand what life is all about. I can't understand it on my own. Lord, touch my eyes and I will be able to see. This is how we have to come to the Lord, crying out to Him, crying for mercy. And when we do that, when we're knocking on His door, and when we're calling out to Him, He comes to us and He touches our eyes and He says, you can see. Open your eyes and see. See the truth about me. See the truth about everything else. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And when it occurs, what it brings us into is a new relationship with Him, to where we begin to follow Him. Just as this blind beggar, now receiving a sight, who could have just taken off and said, okay, well, now I can go get a job, do all those things I want to do. He dedicated himself to following Jesus. And we should follow Jesus. Once He does touch our lives, we follow Him, we commit ourselves to Him, and we begin to walk in obedience to Him and following in His footsteps. But then not only that, we live out the rest of our lives just glorifying God, praising Him for the wonderful things that He has done for us. You know, the miracle of the gospel message is greater than the miracle of a person literally receiving their sight. Paul said in Romans chapter 1 and verse 16 that he was not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. Paul was not ashamed of the gospel because he knew it was the very power of God. And it wasn't the power of God to receive sight or to be healed or to calm storms or all these other things that we think are, you know, these wonderful miracles, and they were. But the greatest miracle of all is salvation. When God takes a heart, a spirit that is dead before Him, and brings it back to life, resurrects the person, brings new life to a person, restores the person before Him, and then leads the person into a life of holiness and righteousness, that's a miracle. And that's a miracle that anyone who will call upon Him and say, Son of David, have mercy upon me, can enjoy. And so let's take this story of this blind beggar to heart and recognize the fact that that's our starting point. We're all blind beggars before Him, but thanks be to God, we have a Savior who doesn't pass us by, but He'll stop by, touch our lives, change our lives forever, and therefore we can then follow Him the rest of our days, praising and glorifying God for the great miracle that He has brought in us. If you'd like this experience today, we open it up to you to enjoy all the riches of Christ. In either case, I do thank you guys for listening in today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.